Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby, and today we are going to be talking about sound healing and how it can help you in your divorce healing journey, or really in any kind of healing journey in your lifetime. And my guest is Avi Sherbill. He is the founder of SoundRx and is a renowned sound healing practitioner with a background in sound production and TV and film music composition. After transitioning from a career in music production, Avi discovered his passion for the pure vibrational frequency of sound. He began crafting unique sound experiences designed to help individuals tune into their higher essence. Today, Avi regularly guides sound baths and conducts training sessions for groups and individuals worldwide. His work has been featured on PBS, in Harper's Bazaar, LA Weekly, and more. So I am so excited to have Avi here today to talk about this wonderful healing modality. Thanks so much, Avi, for being here, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Rachel, and appreciate that introduction. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I've been wanting to do a podcast on sound healing for a long time, so you are the perfect person, and I'm excited. For those who don't know about sound healing, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So sound healing is the practice of using vibrations, using frequencies to help shift the state of the nervous system. And so the nervous system, the brain, the entire body is pulsating, it's moving, it's electric. And so it really naturally syncs up to external vibrations or energies. So when the body hears rhythmic, stable sounds like bowls, chimes, or even a human voice, even their own voice, it helps bring them out of that, what we call fight or flight or sympathetic arousal, and into a more regulated, restorative state. And we, in general, want to try and get back to there, often. But in that state, it's really helpful in regards to the healing part of sound healing. In that state, it allows for people to process emotions, patterns, release tension. And I think afterwards, in my experience from doing it, feel more connected to themselves.
Wonderful. Yes, I've done some sound baths incorporated with yoga and also just in meditation. And it's wonderful. It's so relaxing. So you mentioned a couple of instruments. What kind of instruments are you often used, or do you often use in your sound bath sessions?
Yeah. So I always say the most powerful instrument is actually our own voice. I think all of the other instruments are going to be coming from outside of you. And oftentimes we look to things outside of us for answers, but it's actually using our own inner sound, our own voice, actually vibrating us from the inside out, that I feel is most powerful, most potent, most empowering. And I think the voice holds on to a lot. I think we kind of learn to use our voice in certain ways based on experiences in school and in family and just the dynamics that we grew up in. And so there's something really powerful in using the voice, not for language, but using the energetics of your voice to really kind of release the voice and what you're holding on to from the body. So voice, I would say, is the most impactful and something I always try to bring in to sessions. And I work with sound in a lot of different ways, depending on who I'm working with and the setting. But I'll always try to use the voice. But if I'm doing a more general sound bath, have the voice, and then I'll most likely be including crystal bowls and Himalayan bowls. That's probably the most common instrument that you see being used in sound healing. And part of why that is they create these gorgeous, long, steady tones that really help slow the mind down, slow the body down. So it's just really powerful for grounding anxiety, stress, and I think really brings people to that sweet spot where I was mentioning earlier about allowing people to process emotions and move through experiences. But in more targeted approaches, I'll use tuning forks, in particular weighted forks, which are really nice because, bowls are multi-frequency instruments and they just fill up the room in a beautiful way. But there's a specificity to the way we use tuning forks. And so if you understand where you're placing it and how you're using it, it can be really powerful for opening up specific areas of the body and also stimulating nitric oxide production, which is really nice because that oxygenates the blood. And a lot of people, as you get older, you don't produce as much nitric oxide. So really helpful in that way. And then I'll usually incorporate what I call palate cleansers, which are bells or chimes, just to add that contrast of lightness and create a more ethereal sound. And so each instrument is working slightly differently on the nervous system. But when we combine them, it creates just this really nice layered emotional release, I find.
Yeah, it's just lovely. And I read something interesting on your website about the effect of sound healing on different, like on depression or anxiety or fatigue, confusion, anger. So that's a really interesting thing for people to check out if they want to see the difference before and after a sound bath, of how people feel and experience that. And we'll have the links up at the end so you can check those out. But when we're talking about something traumatic, like somebody going through a divorce, and in order to support that emotional healing that we need to go through, and a lot of people don't really know how, what types of reactions might someone expect to experience from going through? And I just kind of mentioned some of the things on your website, but when you're having that traumatic experience and your life is kind of feels like it's been turned upside down, what kind of reactions or transformations might someone expect to experience from sound healing? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when we go through a difficult experience, like a divorce, and obviously there's similar to losing a parent, there's a grieving process, grieving what has happened, grieving the person that you were and what you're moving through. And so oftentimes we'll address what's happening with a more cognitive approach, right? Kind of trying to understand what has happened and understand what to do and where, we might have gone wrong or what we can learn from it, glean from it. The importance, though, of sound is it actually helps us process things at a bodily level. And so we actually bypass the thinking mind, because most people are masters at intellectualizing things, right? We're really great at kind of playing things over and looping things in our mind and, trying to understand it. And that is important. But then there's also addressing it at the level of the nervous system. And so grief, stress can live in the body as a contraction. That tends to be what the body does when it's experiencing difficult emotions. So the breath starts to tighten, the mind starts to accelerate, the nervous system tends to get stuck in a survival mode or a state of charge and overwhelm. So sound works almost like a pattern interrupts all of these patterns. And just the frequencies themselves help soften the body. So where the body's contracting, now it starts to open. And where it's tightening, the sound actually stimulates a release. And as it does that, the body's actually relearning how to be with itself by regulating your heart rate, regulating your breath, regulating the nervous system. And in that more open state, people often feel spacious enough, like there's enough space to finally feel what's underneath the stress, because it's very hard to heal in survival mode. It's actually not possible, right? The body can't heal itself unless it reaches that homeostasis where it can, like I was saying, have enough space to feel and to process, to integrate some of what it's been moving through. Whereas what happens a lot when we go through these difficult experiences is we're just trying to hold it together, right?
Right.
And so, that's needed probably at the initial stage, just trying to like move through different parts of it, which probably are really complicated. And sometimes the misnomer is that you always want to be relaxed. You always want to be calm, right? But that's not the case. You want to move into action when you need to, but what tends to happen is the nervous system kind of like misfires. And so when you want to actually be able to engage from a place of calm, you're still in that place of jitteriness and overwhelm and panic. Mm-hmm. And so it's there's a disconnect. And so I find sound really allows for space where you can actually kind of move through things, but again, not in an intellectual sort of way. You're not thinking, because sound really helps slow the mind down enough where it actually turns off the more rational, linear sort of thinking, and it allows you to address things in a subconscious way, really where a lot of these beliefs are stored and where they're coming from. And to me, in my own experience with sound, that's where the healing really happens. But sometimes it doesn't appear like anything is happening. And that's kind of the subtlety of what it's doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me too, when I listen to sound to certain frequencies, or just every night before I go to bed, I listen to really beautiful, quiet frequencies or sounds, and it really just helps me just come down from my day, just totally relax. And our minds are always, like you said, we're always thinking so many things. And when we're going through something tough, I mean, I remember in the beginning starting my healing process and thinking, I need to do all these things. I need to, but most of all, I need to open my heart. I knew that. And I just started experimenting with different modalities to see how that made me feel. And I think of sound is kind of almost like, if I had to compare to think of something to compare it to, would be like if an athlete pulled a muscle, and, everything in your body just kind of goes there to just protect the muscle, right? So it's hard to relax it so it can start healing, because you've got the white blood cells, you've got everything kind of swimming up there to help protect, and putting this barrier around it. Does that even make sense? Yeah. And so you have to just be able to release that, right? So you can just let the blood flow, let everything flow around it. And it's kind of similar, I think. I mean, that's how I would see it if I had to compare the benefits of sound and the relaxation that it brings, to allow you to, just like you said, it's not something to create so much all the thinking and all the and analyzing, but more so to get you to that point where you just come down, so you can start healing, right? Yeah. So it's not as if you're going to go to a sound bath and walk out and be like, I'm healed. It's a process. How do you, when you're going to work with somebody, how do you determine what somebody needs? Is it just you have a conversation first and kind of just intuitively feel what might help that person, or how do you do that?
So I'll first send them an assessment, and that will also just kind of to gather information. And because I don't like to go in blind where it's like suddenly
Right.
it can be hard within a span of 2 minutes to think it like, oh, okay, now I need to totally reformat what's going on, because there's such a wide range of things that can be going on. Right. And so, somebody can be dealing with neurodevelopmental issues. Somebody can be dealing with a terminal illness. Somebody could have just come out of a divorce. Somebody has a physical injury. They were in a car accident. I've seen a lot of different things. And so just, to me, the most important thing is that whatever you're introducing to the body is safe. And so safety is really the protocol. Sound is almost, I don't want to say secondary, because it is kind of the what we're using, but I only use sounds if I feel they're safe and if the approach is safe for that person. Because sometimes people, they're in such a traumatized experience that's living in them that it's hard for them to actually just sit still. And so I don't want to bypass that and just kind of try to suddenly like move them like very deeply into this relaxation response. So
Right.
there's ways of kind of moving people into a state where they're going to be the most receptive. So I use an assessment, and that will really allow for me to see what's going on. But also a part of it is oftentimes that's just an aspect of what's happening, because somebody might say, oh, I'm experiencing anxiety. But then as you're in the session with them, you're just intuitively feeling there's something else aside from just anxiety going on. Right. And so I'm just stressed, But then as they're kind of speaking to you, you realize, oh, there's some other things going on. And it doesn't even need to be communicated. It's just these, it's like a signal in a way that you're picking up on. And so there's a part that I'll like to gather in terms of information beforehand. And then there's also in the moment, the thing that I'm really doing in a session is I'm deeply attuning to somebody and really sensing what is going on with them, what's appropriate for them, and modifying the sound in certain ways. And so if somebody's working through childhood trauma, I'll maybe introduce certain frequencies in the session, or even have them listen to certain frequencies afterwards for 5-10 minutes and create a practice similar to what you were saying. Like I listen to these sounds at night to kind of wind down. And so there's certain frequencies for everything. If somebody has alcoholism, I would introduce certain frequencies, which are going to be very different than if somebody's experiencing deep depression, or, somebody is dealing with an injury. So I'll kind of introduce certain frequencies in a session and give them some to listen to. And then I'll choose the instruments that I want to be using within the session. And sometimes I'll use the instruments directly on the body. Sometimes I won't do that, and I'll just, be playing instruments from afar. But you'll notice things I'll notice things as a session goes on, something we call somatic sensations or somatic signaling. And so it's something so beautiful, really, which is you're communicating with their body without speaking, without words. And that to me is just like one of the most beautiful aspects of working in this way, is that you're just seeing things and almost having this conversation. Like the sound is having a conversation with them, but there's no words being expressed. And so I'll start to notice the way that their body is moving. And sometimes there's these more obvious sensations like crying, emotional release. Other times you'll just notice at the beginning, they're breathing from their chest, like they're holding on a lot, or they're tensing their jawline, and kind of there's like a bracing, because a lot of people actually identify with what's going wrong with them in a weird way, because it's been such a part of their life. It's actually, as weird as it sounds, it's like very uncomfortable, but it's comfortable in a certain way. And so to start to kind of even move into the feeling tone of what's happening can be very challenging for a lot of people. So I'll notice there's a holding on, and there's something I'll start to notice as they start to let go is even though their eyes are closed, beneath the eyelids, there's a lot of fluttering. So there's like a deep processing that's happening. And I'll notice that. And then usually at a certain point within the session, that'll stop. And you see underneath the eyelids, it becomes very relaxed. And then you see the muscle start to relax and the body starts to drop and the breathing is occurring more in the diaphragm. And so that is where, like I was saying, the body's moving into that deeply restorative state. And then they're just processing emotions, sensations. The sound is moving into certain areas of their nervous system and actually restructuring and reorganizing parts of them. And that isn't for me to do. It is just the sound doing what it's going to do.
That's beautiful. I love that you have such deep training and you notice those things, and it's so incredible because obviously not everyone can do that. Do you ever use sounds from yourself? Do you ever do humming or use your voice when you're in these sessions?
Oh yeah, of course. Like I was saying, I always, I'll always, I don't want to use always, but oftentimes I'll start with the voice, and sometimes I'll have them connect with their own voice. Because sometimes what trauma tends to do is trauma robs us of connection. It robs us of choice, right? Because the nervous system doesn't feel safe enough to have a choice. And so the body likes to stay in what's known and what's predictable. I mean, the mind does as well. And so sometimes when I'm just doubling up whatever sound they're doing with my own voice, I'm actually creating this connection where there may have been isolation and a feeling of I'm alone in this. And so it's subtle, but something like they're humming or they're releasing a physiological sigh, and then I alongside them am, right? It feels very connecting. It's, to me, the difference, like we were talking earlier about our children. It's like there's one thing where your kid is doing something, I tell them to go do something, and then I'm just standing from afar above them, watching them do it, right? There's another way of doing it where I'm actually on the ground and I'm doing it with them and I'm helping them. And there is that engagement, there is that connection. And that is the much stronger and better way for kids to learn, right? And so the same thing when you're working with traumatic experiences, people are coming to kind of meet these parts of themselves that they haven't been able to look at or address. And so you're providing the safety to allow for that. So yeah, I love using the voice and being alongside them in that practice of using the voice. And then there's, in particular, a practice I do called emotional release, where I just take what somebody's experiencing and I translate that into a sound. And so, like to give you an example, I've worked a lot with kids with neurodevelopmental issues, and so they have a hard time. I mean, there's a wide range of things that can be going on, like sensory processing disorders. But one of the powerful things is seeing them start to engage with their own voice. And there's even, I was actually telling somebody about this yesterday. There was a woman who had gone through our training. She was working with a child. He has autism, but to the point where he's nonverbal, non-communicative, right? And so she was doing the humming alongside the mom who's in the session with her and doesn't speak. And then after the session, the boy in the back seat was going, right? So sometimes when we even just show the voice being used in a certain way, it actually turns on these new neural connections, these new pathways that allow for kids to explore it as well. So I love using the voice. Yeah.
Well, that's really powerful about that boy. And I've read studies about just music and how good it is for children with autism, especially, maybe nonverbal children, because it allows them supposedly to be able to process things differently, like you said, and they can feel the music. It's not just to hear the music, but they can feel it and the vibration of the music. And so, yeah, it's really quite amazing.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking on that for a moment, part of what is happening is, like I was saying, there's a processing disorder where their ears and they're not able to filter out certain sounds. So sound is actually can be a very activating experience for them. It's very stimulating, and that's why sometimes you'll see them wearing headphones to kind of block out certain sounds. So when sound is actually introduced in a very safe way, in a very grounded, because everybody loves sound, right? But they sometimes haven't been able to enjoy it and experience it in the way we might have been, where our ears immediately background certain noises, like there's traffic going on, but I don't hear it very loudly because I filter it out and it just kind of gets backgrounded. So sometimes if everything's in the foreground, it's very challenging. So introducing sound in certain ways, and I mean, sound tells a story. It's like telling one of the greatest stories without using a word, and so for kids who can't communicate with words, it can be very powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful. What about back to someone who's gone through trauma, or I guess focusing on the divorce, someone going through divorce, or anyone? I mean, how do you determine how many times they need to come back to do a session with you, or do you give them things they can do on their own? Well, I guess you do, because you mentioned that, but using the voice. But how do you determine that?
Yeah, so I always like to give practices to people to use, usually throughout the week. Very easy practices, and just have them realizing that sound is something that's always occurring. It's always around us, and you can be in harmony with it, or you can be out of harmony with it, right? And so there's a way of connecting to sounds that can be very powerful. So, I mean, I'll get to your question, but just as an example is walking. Walking is so powerful, so often overlooked as just a tool to use. I mean, it's something like I find to be one of the most beneficial tools for me is like going on walks.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah. We're in it together.
I walk a lot.
Yeah. I mean,
I walked through my divorce healing.
Yeah. Literally and figuratively.
I did.
So walking is so powerful. I feel like, I forget who says it, but it's like the longer the walk, the better the thought, and so I find as you're walking, it's just, I mean, there's a lot that's happening as you're walking, and what you're engaging in. But a really powerful practice, and, Buddhism has a version of this as well, but is really listening to the sounds around you as you're walking and actually being in resonance, as opposed to just like, sound is happening, but I'm not paying attention, but actually kind of listening, like a deep listening to what is going on in your environment. And the deeper you listen, you find it also enhances your ability to listen inwardly, to listen to yourself as well. And so I find when we're just walking, and instead of just kind of, aggressively walking and, you have headphones on, you're on phone calls, like even if you do that, taking 5 minutes during that walk and just noticing as you're walking, there's a whole concert going on around you. And so those sort of things I find are I find the simpler the practice, the better, And so things like that are really helpful. In terms of your question, I feel, I haven't been divorced myself, but it's something most of my siblings have gone through. I watched my parents go through it. And so it's not an unknown to me. I'm pretty familiar with it, although I haven't experienced it, like I said, personally. divorce activates so many layers, even I'll just speak for myself as a child, right? I wasn't a child, but kids going through a divorce, it activates so many layers of what you had known and who your parents are and what you thought was, but is no longer. And, who do I trust? Who do I go to? And who's going to help me and all of these things. And then there's the actual two people going through the divorce and all that is bringing up. And so I feel like it's activating so many layers in terms of, I said earlier, the grief. There's a shift of identity, I think there's fears, maybe some relief. All of these things are happening, but then we just name it divorce.
Right.
So there's just that word, but that's just a name, right? It's similar because I approach this with anything, because people will say, this is a more extreme example, but I have a disease, I have lung cancer, right? And they do have lung cancer. At the same time, that's a name that was given to them. And so something I find that can be really helpful is actually moving past the name, past the label, and moving into the sensations, into the feelings within that. And so I find sound really helps us move out of that more cognitive understanding of I'm divorced and into that feeling tone of I'm experiencing grief. And as I'm experiencing grief, it happens for me mostly in my chest. And it feels like there's a boot on my chest. And as I'm shifting out of the person I thought I was and into this new version, I'm feeling fear. I'm also feeling a sense of joy, a sense of relief, and being able, again, to access that in a regulated and restorative way is very unusual, because these things tend to activate our sympathetic nervous system. And so when we're able to kind of meet these feelings, these sensations, but from a place of calm to, whatever degree is possible, where I can start to kind of move through these things, that's where we see there's a lot of the healing, and we're actually not holding as tightly to these experiences because we've allowed for this safe external space to process it. And then that creates the safe internal space where the body can process it without the overwhelm. And so I find, just using that term, people who've gone through divorce, and I've worked with people who've gone through divorce, when they start to meet this part of themselves, I find there's a lot of crying, a lot of emotional release, a lot of somatic sensations, usually like a warmth or a tingling, because the body's kind of moving deeply into that restorative state. They'll find themselves feeling maybe clear, like their thinking is clear, because another aspect I hadn't mentioned is sound. The same way our heart has beats per minute, our mind has thoughts per minute. And so sound, as we're experiencing it, can actually cut our thoughts per minute down by half, right? And so when we're having a lot of thoughts, it's very hard to think clearly, and especially trying to work through what to do and, all of those things. So oftentimes as we slow down, we actually have a much clearer line of thinking, of thoughts, and realizing how I want to protect my own energy, what I'm actually needing underneath a lot of that noise, and then choosing from a place of connection as opposed to choosing from a place of overwhelm, or I feel like a lot of threat. I'm like in a survival response, and so, right. I could go on because I've experienced just in sessions working with people dealing with some, really severe life situations. They're their ability to live in a home is sometimes being taken away, and that's kind of like on the table. And so it's like, how do I kind of move through this, or, you know, situations with children and all of that. And so I think it sometimes feels counterintuitive because you just want to go into action mode and kind of like more of that fiery, you know, if you were to use the elements, it's like more of a fiery response. And sometimes sound actually allows us to move into that kind of like cooler, more flowing state, which, you know, we don't need to always be in, but can be really helpful because instead of forcing something, it's giving the nervous system the permission to let go. And then from that place, I think there's a lot of clarity.
I love that. And that is so true. And I think a lot of the people that I speak with, well, many of them, especially I see it with men, they, not to generalize, but they tend to, when you talked about kind of getting to that place where you can kind of, I don't know, come down a little bit, and how the sound helps do that. There are some people who will avoid doing things where they are just still, or they are just sitting or walking, or because they want to keep going, because they don't want to face all of the things that are going on in their head and their heart and where they are. And they think that if they're busy, they'll just keep going. And I don't know what they think is going to happen in the long run, but we all know, you know, the more you sweep under the rug, the harder time you're going to have down the road. At least that's what I see.
For guys in particular, I find this very hard. You know, not always, but like I would say men tend to have a harder time with these sort of practices because, like you're saying, looking underneath the hood can be very activating for people, and men in particular, where through society and through conditioning and programming, they've learned they need to be the one who's holding it together or keeping things going, you know. And so the idea of
be a man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And sometimes that isn't even our own because it's intergenerational. And, you know, they say we hold things in our DNA from 3 to 5 generations, and we hold behavioral patterns going back 7 generations. So a lot of these things that we think are us aren't even us. You know, it's just things that are things we inherited. And so for men, it can be hard to look underneath the hood because there is that feeling like if I stop, then I'll almost be like swallowed up by it, you know, and I can't even go there. And that's where I feel attuning to where they are and usually modifying the sound a bit. So we are actually speaking for a little while and then using the sound in a very light and gentle, like approachable way, as opposed to dropping them into like an hour-long sound bath, which might be nice. But, you know, I think initially it can be helpful for them to experience it in a lighter version and just kind of sense how it feels and then kind of re-engage with that. So, I just want to add.
Oh, yeah. I think it's fascinating how, like you mentioned, and how we both see in our different lines of work, how people, the difference between men and women and healing and just the openness, because women obviously, you know, tend to talk more about things and try to understand, analyze why they're feeling a certain thing or how that happened. Whereas men are taught, or, you know, things are changing now. I see, you know, a lot of changing. There's a lot of men's groups and men's coaches and trying to teach men to have that healthy balance. But if we look back in history, men have always been, you know, the protector, the provider, the, you know, figure out what's happening and fix it. Right. So that's the role. And I think that's, you know, you do have to approach when you meet with a client, or when I meet with a client, you have to approach that differently if they are in that mindset. And just to kind of tag on to what you were saying earlier about people, for whatever reason, whether it's some intergenerational thing that you have no idea about that's coming through you, or whether you had problems in your childhood, or you had, bad relationships, or that you're not a confident person or not confident within relationships or whatever it is, we also have that two things against us when we're talking about divorce healing. And one is just, well, I guess it's one thing really, the societal stigma of divorce. And we still have that. And we're kind of transitioning. I've seen in the last, not that long, decade or so, maybe not even, into seeing divorce as, some people are, and there's, conscious uncoupling and things like that, where people are trying to make it more of just a different chapter of life, as opposed to this horrible thing. But you have society, culture, religion, family values, a lot of these things that will tell you, oh, it's wrong. You don't get divorced. And so there's a lot of shame that comes from that. And I think that really plays into the fear that we have, even if we do know that it's the right thing for us. If somebody knows it's the right thing for them, I didn't have that shame, and they want to heal, they still have that shame from wherever it's coming, family, religion, the past. Mm-hmm. So I would assume that also, that takes a lot of work to get someone through that. And I would assume same thing with the sound healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I heard somebody say shame should have already mastered everything. And so there's sometimes that feeling, it could be in relation to, like a divorce, let's say. And there is a feeling like, should have gotten it right. I should have mastered, whatever I was supposed to be doing here. But I don't think any of us were given a guide in how to live, And so the idea that we're supposed to get everything right and everything perfect, and according to this, made up image of how things should be, only causes us pain and a lot of suffering. And so, again, I think a lot of those things happen when we're in that survival state, and when we actually slow down enough, we're able to engage with the deeper layer of reality and see that things are okay, and that there is a lot of good happening here. And there's a great mindfulness teacher, Tara Brach. She talks about how, 80% of thoughts have a negative nature to them, that there's a negativity bias, because that's how we've survived. It's how you're here. It's how I'm here, is that our ancestors sensed what they needed to do to survive. So we're kind of like hardwired to survive. And it's why they call it a nervous system, right? It's meant to be nervous and keep us alive and on guard. And so it's really important to find those times where you're able to turn the nervousness off and you're able to turn the negativity off. And it's easier said than done, but to kind of even get a taste of that can be really impactful, seeing like, wow, I can operate from this place, or from, this vibration is, so.
Certainly. And again, getting to that place where you can just maybe come down and take the pressure off a little bit of yourself. You also in time start to welcome the lessons that you learn from that, because everything is a lesson. Like you said, we're not taught what to do when we're kids. Hey, here's what you do when you get divorced. If you get divorced, we're not taught how to handle tough things. Like, here's what happens if you are supporting a family and you get fired. These are all, I feel, the way I live my life is I look at all those challenges. Some of them are really tough, but I look at them as lessons, and how can I grow from that which is happening in my life? Because there's things we can't control, but I also feel that we can set the course of our lives through our choices and through our mindset and how we focus on something and how we see it. So that's hard for some people. And I spend a lot of time working on just those mindset shifts with my clients. And it's a beautiful thing when you feel something shift, you feel something change. Like you said, you can see someone on the table with the eye movement, and maybe it slows down or it stops, and you know that there's a shift going on within. And I see that too in different ways. And it's it's wonderful. So
Yeah.
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 I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about sound healing, or if not, I would love if there's a possibility for you to maybe give us a little example of something. I don't know if you're open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
or something that we can do ourselves, even with our own voice.
Yeah. So I guess the one added thing before we would go into a short practice is, to me, when you're dealing with the emotional weight of divorce or things like that, I think there's certain times where when you're dealing with overwhelm or you're dealing with grief, when I'm working with sound, you really want to listen to slower, lower, gentler rhythms. But there's also times where you don't just want to be in that yin energy. You actually want to build and create movement and kind of repair. And I find that's also something nice that I feel like I've been talking a lot about relaxation, but there's also a lot of energizing sounds and energizing tones that we can use to kind of create healthy energy that's not scattered and kind of jittery. So, our idea with SoundRx is kind of in the name. It's like sound is medicine, and always just tuning into the sound that we're needing. And so it's nice sometimes to also see that there's also energizing aspects of life and sound.
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to share something with you that you'll think probably is interesting. When I started my healing journey, I stopped listening to all mainstream music. I pretty much, for a while, I was just listening to music that was just sound and not singing. And I also stopped watching television. So I really wanted to kind of go more within myself, but I did enjoy dancing, and almost every day I would just turn on some music. I tried not to listen to anything where they were talking about, anything negative, even like a breakup or whatever, but I would turn on some great music with a fun vibe, and I would just move. And every time I did that, I felt this kind of release within my body. It was incredible of just, I just felt happier afterwards. I felt joyful. And so that was, I talk about that in my book, about how I stopped listening to just regular music and found some great spiritual stuff, and even just, like I said, music with no words. And I still do that a lot today because those are kind of my go-to now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what you were just explaining or sharing with me is, it's something, again, it's hardwired into us, this idea of movement, dance, and song. I mean, it's something our ancestors were doing. And I say that regardless of where you're from, because all of our ancestors were doing it, And to me, this is how sound was used. It was used in small gatherings to resonate, to vibrate, and to move energy. And I think, it's probably another podcast talking about how music became where it is today. But I think it's used in a very different way, and it's lost a lot of its medicinal value. And just the idea of, this happens a lot to me when I'm, training with people. They're like, I'm not musical, I don't sing well, all of these things, because they've created this association between sound and talent or entertainment. And I'm not good at it, and so I tried to explain it's got nothing to do with that. So even if you're the worst dancer, whatever that means, I think of like Elaine on Seinfeld, if you remember that episode, doing exactly.
I can't imitate it, but that was classic.
Yeah. So even if you're Elaine, doing that sort of dance, it's got nothing to do with good, bad, right, wrong, and all of it has to do with how it feels inside of you.
Right.
Yeah. And so to me also, Wow, I have a hard time listening to a lot of music I used to listen to because of that, just that same reason. I mean, just sometimes like the lyrics alone are just so activating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So you want to do a
let's
practice.
do something fun.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel just kind of, we are kind of talking about it. Maybe we could even just hum for a minute. It can be really nice. So humming is a really powerful tool. And even if you more associate using the voice with chanting or mantras, you'll notice if you break down a lot of the mantras, it's just made up of tones. It's made up of oh, mm. And so each tone creates a different emotional response, And so anytime you go, oh, you use that sound for that moment for a particular reason, right? Like you have an insight. It's like, oh, but you don't go, ee, we go, oh, or we're trying to relax the body and we go, ah, right? Like you're stressed. And so we make certain sounds intuitively, and it's almost become these cultural norms or stereotypes where it's like you eat some satisfying food and you're like, who made this, right? So certain sounds create certain effects. And so one of the great sounds is the sound, is the humming sound. And all that we're doing with that is we're just attaching a sound to the exhale. So it's not anything too crazy. But what I always try to mention is as you're doing that, you want to feel as you inhale that the inhale is coming from the diaphragm, and you're practicing diaphragmatic breathing, because what can happen is if you breathe too much from the chest, your intercostal muscles don't lift and there's less space in the chest cavity. And so it can feel like sometimes a little activating if you're not breathing from the right place. So I always like to kind of just make L's with my hands, and you could just kind of place them on the ribs, and we can start by, you can take them off after this, but you just want to feel as you inhale, the ribs kind of lift up a little bit. The belly expands outwards, and then as you exhale, feel that deflate as well. So the rib cage comes down a bit, the belly deflates. And another aspect that's nice is if we can practice nasal breathing. So nasal breathing can be a lot nicer for these moments. So breathing in through the nose once more. Feeling the diaphragm come up, and then exhale coming down. And then before we get into the humming, and you can take the hands off if they're there, if you're listening, you can take the hands off. And what could be nice is creating an intention of something that you want to release through the humming sound. So maybe there's something from the day, from the week that's just been feeling challenging, a bit heavy. And just creating that clear idea of what it is. And feel as we're humming, just through that sound, it coming out and it coming through and releasing. And so we'll do it for 5 breaths. We'll do 5 hums together. It should be about a minute. So taking a breath in and then humming. Again, breathing in. Let's do it 2 more times. Breathing in. This last hum, bringing greater volume and lengthening the hum perhaps a little more, a little longer. Breathing in. And keeping the eyes closed for just a couple moments after, allowing the breath to return to a regular pace, rhythm. And just sensing what's present for you, even small micro shift in how you're feeling, or if there's nothing, that's okay too. And then we'll start to slowly open the eyes and just attune to the environment that you're in. You can just bring the art of noticing, just kind of what you're looking at, what you're seeing. And just sensing as we close out, if a little more grounding in your body, in what you're observing, what you're feeling. Thanks.
Thank you. I was just going to say that felt so grounding. It almost felt like everything just kind of, I don't know, just released a little bit. And it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So hopefully all of the listeners and the viewers can see the benefits of sound and how it can affect you and help you on your journey, your healing journey. And I thank you so much for being here, Avi.
Yeah.
If you want to reach out to Avi or partake in some of his sound healing sessions, all of the information will be in the show notes and on the screen here if you're watching. And I also want to say that if you enjoyed this episode today, please do me the honor of subscribing to this channel, liking, commenting, sharing. I love finding guests like Avi to come on and share these unique modalities and experiences that you may not have heard of, or you may and just never tried them, to help you along in your journey. So thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you again, Avi. I appreciate you.
Thank you.